This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled today to have with me George Eychner. First of all, George, welcome to Rotary Club of Kerrville.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
George, can you tell us when you began your Rotary career?
Actually, long before dirt. So 1989, I retired from the Air Force from Goodfellow in 88 and then got the job as the executive director of the Mount Wesley Conference Center here in 89. And Ed Hamilton, who was a former president of Rotary and a realtor, was on the board of directors for Mount Wesley Conference Center and was part of the yes vote that got me the job. And then he adopted Judy and I and ended up selling us the house. And then since he was in Rotary, he said, "Hey, you need to come to Rotary." And so I did, and it was really a good experience. One of the things I really appreciated about being able to be included in a local group like this is that the Mount Wesley Conference Center was a mission of the United Methodist Church, the Southwest Texas Conference. And we held religious retreats, kids camps, and things like that year round. But all the people that we dealt with were from out of town, and never had the people we bought groceries from were from San Antonio, the Cisco and those folks. And so I had hardly any contact with local people. And getting into Rotary really opened my eyes to what Kerrville's all about and gave me a chance to get acquainted with city leaders and all that. And from that standpoint, it was just really a valuable personal experience for me.
What was the Rotary Club of Kerrville like in 1989? That was right after Rotary started admitting women.
Yeah.
And how was that experience?
It was much more formal. I mean, everybody wore coat and tie then. Yeah. I mean, you didn't see flip-flops or shorts or anything like that. We had one guy, Heine Gleiman, who was the sign of spring and summer that he wore shorts to the meeting. And he was probably the only guy in the club. But there was, I think, probably about 150, 160 people in the club. We met at the end of the hills. And I forget the name of the room, Blue Bonnet Room or something like that. But they set up for 120 people. And generally every week, every seat was full. And one of the things that is different, we meet at the Kroc Center now. And one of the things about the Kroc Center is that you go through, get your meal, and then sit at the table. At the end of the hills, you had to go through the meeting room and then to get your meal. And so you pass by the head table, you pass circuitous route getting to that. And by the time you got to the serving line, you probably had a conversation with 10, 15, 20 people. And so it's much more congenial, much more, more conversations, more interaction, more personal relationships with people. There were folks still sat at the same table all the time. We had Tom Terrell and another guy, I can't think of his name, but the joke was that when they passed, they were going to put a memorial on their chair and not let anybody else sit there.
So they weren't going to will their chairs to someone else? So tell us about your sort of trajectory through Rotary, because I know you've been very involved over the years.
Yeah, it kind of started kind of slow, but I was the president in 2010, 2011, and then I was on different committees. I was on the board before that, and just kind of one of the worker bees. I didn't have anything really fantastic. I wasn't the song leader at that time. And how I got into the president was kind of a serendipity thing. Greg Schrader, who was a publisher of the Daily Times, was elected to be secretary. I think had been there. He hadn't taken office yet. It was about a month before the change of seats in there. And he got transferred to another town. I can't think of the name of it. And so they asked me if I'd take his place. And that's how I got in. It was a good deal. So I didn't go through the vetting process or anything like that. Brian Bondi was the president at the time, and he really worked long and hard to get me to say yes, because I really wasn't that excited about doing it. But that was really a good experience. It's really an honor and a pleasure and really a privilege to be in a leadership position in a crowd of people like the Rotary Club represents. I mean, there's some great folks in there, people, movers and shakers and influencers, and to be in charge of keeping all those folks entertained and interested in going on is a lot of fun, but it's harder than it looks.
I'm I think 2-year full member now. And one of my observations is, number one, there are a lot of women in Rotary. There are a lot of women who are or have been in leadership positions in Rotary in Kerrville. And from the talks I've heard, Kerrville has always had women in leadership positions in the local Rotary Club. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, in fact, the first woman who was admitted to our Rotary Club was Jane Rommel, and I think it was like 1985, and she was still alive and in the club and took part of that. And then Mary Ann Wolford was our first president. And the interesting thing, there was really no consternation or concern or animosity or anything like that. Not, I got a couple of friends, though, that think that allowing women in the Rotary is the downfall of the system. And you talk about being conservative, man. They're so far to the right, they're left, so.
I hear you. What are two or three of the things that you've either worked on or headed up that really stand out in your mind from your career at Rotary?
The first, I mentioned Ed Hamilton again and Jeff Wendling. With the three of us were the ones that started the first responders luncheon, where we recognized the best of the best. I think probably of all the things that I've done and been a part of, that stands out. It's one of the things Ed said, how we got started. He came up to me and said, we had one city council meeting last night, and they gave awards out to the fireman of the year and the policeman of the year. And he says, there's 25 people in the room, and it's a small room. And he said, that's no way to honor these folks. He said, we need to do it in a grand way, and we ought to have a special program for it. So that's how that got started, and it's still going.
That's one of the biggest luncheons of the year.
Yeah. Then that started in 2011 when we did that. It was the very first one. So it's been going 13 years now. But I think the one thing that, in my opinion, that Rotary does for the community that is most rewarding and most beneficial and most productive, it's hard to put an adjective to it, but it's to have that and to honor the folks that are out there every day taking care of us. The other thing is Christmas decorations. And through my year as president, one of the things I wanted to do was to get lights on downtown and get a big Christmas tree. And we raised probably about $70,000 or $80,000, and Rotary contributed half of that. But the big Christmas tree that we have on the courthouse lawn, and at that time we put lights on buildings, outline lights on the buildings downtown. The first year Rotary paid for everything. The second year we paid for half. And then the goal was the third year the merchants were supposed to pick it up. And that didn't happen. So for 10 years, Dr. Bill Rector and I would go around raising money to pay for half the cost of the lights on the buildings downtown. And unfortunately that's passed, but it worked hard to try and bring a Christmas spirit to and Rotary's was a big help making that happen.
And a third event or something that stands out to you?
One of the things that's the most fun that we don't do anymore is a fish fry. And it was an annual event and was open to the public. The first year we were here that they had it out where Comanche Trace is. At that time was the Shelton Ranch. And they had a horse barn out there, and they set up picnic tables, and Rotary had their own cooking equipment, and it actually was a big drunk. The cooks were just falling all over themselves, but it was a good meal and all that. And then we moved from there to, where we moved to? It's been about 2 to 3 different places. We finally ended up at the Tybee High School cafeteria. But that was a lot of fun. One of the neat things about that, it got the whole club involved. Everybody had a job, whether it was cleaning up something or picking up or handing out tickets or collecting money. But we'd have, I bet, half the club involved in some way of doing that. And then plus the community would be able to come in and they'd be able to see who we were and what we were trying to do. And unfortunately, that became harder than it looked and more trouble than it was worth. We went from having our own cookers to having the Bass Club furnish the cookers to having HEV prepared for us. And every year it kind of went downhill a little bit. The quality wasn't quite the same. And the enthusiasm was there, but the rest of it didn't quite match up with that level of enthusiasm.
George, I was struck by what you said about your job, your professional job at the time you joined Rotary, and how it really helped you learn about local community, learn local businessmen or local businesses, and meet local businessmen, because your business was focused not really on folks in Kerrville, but outside of the city. And so I wanted to maybe end this podcast by asking you, what would you tell a young professional today who has an internet job or works remotely for a large corporation outside of Kerrville? What would you tell them about why they should join Rotary Club of Kerrville?
One, I think just a networking and the ability to get with people. For example, we were in the hotel business. We had food service and not maid service, but people stayed overnight. And Hans Sluneger owned the Inn of the Hills at the time. And so I would sit with him and we'd talk about occupancy rates and service and things, tips and techniques for getting things done. And so he was really a valuable assistant to me in my job. And I think there's such a diverse group of people that you can find any number of folks that can help you expand your knowledge, expand your career, And so you get a lot of, I think you get as much out of it as you put into it. And it's an older group. So for young folks, it might be a little uncomfortable to come in, but see a bunch of white-haired guys like me, but it's friendly. And if you give it an opportunity, everybody gets accepted. So
When did you become our songmaster?
when Doug Wintery was president, I think that was like 2001 or something like that. So it's been over 20 years that I've done that, but he was president. He came up and said, "Hey, but I need a songwriter. Would you do that?" And I thought, why not? And I figured I'd do it for a couple of years. And then every year the president come up and say, "Hey, would you keep doing that?" And now nobody asks. They just assume that it's going to happen. So, but that's been a lot of fun. When I first joined the Rotary, we had songs so old there was hair growing on them, and songs from the 20s. I mean, we still sing old songs. Kenneth Early keeps bugging me about that. But it was songs that nobody heard of, or they were obsolete, out of date, that kind of stuff. And so one of the things I try and do is have a current event song, whoever the speaker is or whatever's going on, that we have words that correspond with the time.
The times. So where do you see Rotary down the road?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I think COVID really hurt. I mean, it hurt churches, it hurt social groups, civic groups. One of the things that bothers me is that we have, 120 members, 130 members. And the lunches are generally like only 40, 50 people there. And I don't know what it's going to take to try and get folks back, because the attending the meeting, I think, is really central to developing a core group of folks that are action-oriented, supportive, that are willing to go out and do stuff. And if you got the same 20, 30 people, the old proverb is preaching to the choir, that there needs to be something. The thing that Rotary's doing is actually watering that down, that they're offering groups, meetings that are once a month in the evening, maybe have a wine and cheese with your meeting and that kind of stuff. And so the focus of it from being an action-oriented, positive, intentional meeting is kind of gone away. And I don't know if that'll ever come back, but it's a lot of folks working on it, though. I know the Rotary magazine and things you read in the internet from the different officers, the district officers, that they're working hard. So it may be possible, but I'm not sure.
I forgot to mention, we've got a 100-year anniversary coming up.
That's true. Yeah.
And I think that's about as cool a thing as you can have, a 100-year anniversary.
Yeah, no, yeah, because there's been a number of groups that have gone by the wayside. I mean, there used to be, I think, 3 or 4 Kiwanis groups, and now they're down to 1. There was at least 3 Lions groups here, and I think they're down just to 1. And their numbers have shrunk more dramatically than ours. But no, it's just a basic tenet, I think, that we operate under. The 4-way test, I think, is the thing that is the glue that keeps the thing going, holds it together.
Well, George, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me, and I hope we can continue this conversation.
Oh, you bet. Well, thanks, Tom. Appreciate you having me on.